Statist protectionism and economic nationalism, aka Trumpnomics, puts Americans last. Is Trump's Buy American order or executive order just cynical or ignorant? Kevin Williamson posed that question last week. See, with Trump, it's hard to tell. Donald Trump is nothing if not a consummate entertainer. And the character he plays on television, Donald J. Trump, has appeared in all manner of entertainment. The game show he hosted for many years, pornographic films, the 2016 presidential campaign. It's difficult to tell which was the more loathsome. Now he is taking on a strange new role, that of Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Bum, bum, bum! See, Trump, who was surrounded by people who fancied themselves nationalists, national socialists, really, in the cause of what nation it is not entirely clear. You get it. Is wading deep into an ancient puddle of stupidity, most recently explored by Barack Hussein Obama. Remember his nationalist moment, which lasted about a month in 2011? And Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the walking chia pet, who accidentally did more than anyone other than Kellyanne Conway and Hillary Ronin Clinton to put Trump in the White House. To call it economic nationalism would be too grand. It is merely a very narrow form of special interest politics consisting of backdoor handouts to favored corporate interests. In other words, not draining the swamp, just putting Trump's name on it and making it huge. Trump has signed an executive order organized around two themes: Buy American and Hire American. In sum, the executive order is intended to provide incentives for American businessmen to not act too much like the guy who built Trump Tower with illegal alien labor and who relies on the H-2B visa program to keep Mar-a-Lago stocked with dishwashers and housekeepers. That guy, if we are to take Trump's rhetoric seriously, is kind of an asshole. One who doesn't care about the country at all. The Buy American order is, in Trump's style, pretty vague, with a lot that will need to be filled in later by people who know what the hell they're talking about, which Trump obviously doesn't. And fortunately, he does have a few of those around, but not many. It makes minor administrative changes to existing Buy American federal procurement rules, which date back to the Buy American Act passed in 1933, a year not renowned for the excellence of its political and economic ideas. Bad call, Herbert Hoover. It's also the year my father was born, so it wasn't all bad. The Buy American Act essentially requires that the federal government go to U.S.-based providers both for raw materials such as steel and concrete and for finished goods such as computers and automobiles. Because this is incredibly stupid and fundamentally unworkable, there are waivers. Washington loves a waiver. See the Unaffordable Care Act. Writing an unreasonable law and including discretionary waivers puts a great deal of power in the hands of politicians. many of whom turn out to be interested in such things as, well, money and power, which introducing a large element of uncertainty and outright capriciousness into the procurement process. See, protectionism is statism, big government. That's why I call it national socialism, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, you can have national socialism without flaming racism and swastikas, all right? Although the alt-right is all about that stuff. The current waiver options are pretty broad. The Buy American rules can be waived if the desired goods are not available in the United States, or if U.S. providers produce goods of insufficient quality. If the cost of U.S. goods is unreasonable, if waiving the rule serves the public interest, in practice, that means that if you have the right friends and make the right donations, the Buy American rules may be used to steer contracts your way. If you don't, they won't. This is how you get perfectly legal corruption. Another set of relevant rules dating from 1979, the halcyon days of Jimmy Carter, permit the Buy American rules to be waived in favor of companies based in countries that waive their own procurement preferences if they have them. That gets complicated for Trump because it includes not only our NAFTA trading partners, Canada and Mexico, but all the signatories to the World Trade Organization's Accord on Governmental Procurement, a list that includes the European Union, Red China, Japan, South Korea, New Zealand, Singapore, Switzerland, Norway, Israel, Canada, and the mighty nation of Liechtenstein, ladies and gentlemen. The free trading capitalistic powerhouse so open to outsourcing that it uses other countries' currency, and yet in spite of leaving itself open to exploitation by wily foreign neo-mercantilists, manages to have the highest personal incomes in all of Europe. The United States Department of Defense, which cares a great deal about having the best stuff, has more than 20 reciprocal procurements of its own. There are further agreements on things like trade and civil aircraft, which means that even Macau gets a nose in under the free trade tent. That's a lot of paper, much of which cannot simply be set aside with an executive decree. Trump's order contains some truly absurd feel-good provisions. For example, moving the sign-off requirements up the chain of command in the agencies and requiring cabinet officers to think good and hard about whether companies are based in countries that have trade practices that Donald J. Trump might consider unfair. Don't just go to Mar-a-Lago and have some really, really excellent, best ever in the world in the history of humanity chocolate cake and talk to him and stroke his ego for 15, 20 minutes, and he'll think your procurement policies are wonderful. But don't expect that to have much impact, if you don't have the really, really best ever in the history of humanity chocolate cake. It's just another exciting distraction. Chum for chumps. See, no serious person in Washington takes this Buy American stuff seriously as anything other than what it is. A shakedown. It's Trump's version of green energy subsidies. But Washington is not populated by serious people. Which brings us to Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Love that segue. You see, a pig can snuff out a truffle from a mile away, and Schultz can root out a Wheatle no matter how low or dishonorable in practically any situation. In the wake of the Democrat financial logic bomb of 2008 and 2009, corporate welfare had a big moment. thanks in no small part to Barack Hussein Obama. Boy, Trump and Obama are just so much alike. Have you noticed that? Who was willing to throw out the rule book and the bankruptcy code. Trump must have felt a chill like someone stepping on his grave. In order to make sure that the GM bailout functioned as a bailout for Michigan Democrats, the most important chapter of which is called the United Auto Workers Union. Republicans, who sometimes remember that they are the party of free enterprise, well, they used to be, opposed this. GM's feckless management and its corrupt and useless union bosses were fit for each other. Republicans reasoned, so let them hang together. Schultz suddenly discovered economic nationalism. If it were up to the Republicans, she said, we would be driving foreign cars. Of course, at the time, she drove an Infiniti FX35, a $50,000 SUV that isn't made in America. Schultz went on to say that Republicans who opposed bailing out Democrat interest groups rejected American exceptionalism, which Barack Obama supposedly killed deader than a flounder, a favorite conservative idea at the moment. Now, economic nationalism, which is to say national socialism, and a plainly fascist term, economic patriotism, were all the rage in the Obama years. Ted Strickland, no, not Principal Strickland, Ted Strickland, a former Ohio governor who upon leaving office was laid so low as to go to work for the Center for American Progress, gave a speech in which he indicted Mitt Romney's deficit of economic patriotism. Being all class, he later told a laughing and cheering crowd that the death of Antonin Scalia happened at a good time. Barack Obama, complaining that George W. Bush's economic policies were lining Chinese pockets, denounced him as unpatriotic. Remember when Joe Biden defined patriotism as paying higher taxes? Remember that? Well, Trump told the crowd in Wisconsin that his order will protect workers and students like you. It's America first. You better believe it. Of course, that's what Obama said when he was stirring the same mess for the same reason. That's what Debbie Wasserman Schultz says when she wants a handout for her friends in Michigan. That's what Ted Strickland used to say back when people listened to things said by Ted Strickland. People have been saying the same dumb things back to 1933 and the original Buy American Act. It was said for decades before, going back to the debate over the Corn Laws in England. But it wasn't protection from Big Daddy that made the United States the most powerful country in the world and one of the most dynamic economies in human history. It was innovation, work, investment, none of which can be managed on a fly-by-wire basis from the Trump White House or from Mar-a-Lago, the real Trump White House, no matter how excellent the professional performance of all the nefarious employers scheming and plotting out there. Whether it's Marxian socialism or National Socialism, in other words, it's still socialism. Or how about this for your term of the day? Trump socialism. You know, it's not often that Kevin Williamson plays the good cop and the good cop, bad cop arrangement, but in this case, that was the case at nationalreview.com. Daily Wire editor Ben Shapiro laid the smackdown on Trump's hire American, buy American executive order. He said, called it what it is. Redistribution or theft by any other name. Subsidizing some at the expense of others is old school leftism, and it will not make America great again. I said that quite a few times myself. You go back in the playlist, listen to my podcasts, which, by the way, I urge you and encourage you to do so. blogtalkradio.com/HSR network. And, of course, the Hard Starboard radio channel on YouTube. youtube.com/Hard Starboard Radio. Like, subscribe, learn it, live it, love it. It's the best things going today. This week, Donald Trump reiterated his comment to his Hire American, Buy American program, a supposedly crucial element in his economic nationalist, read National Socialist, big government, statist program, things Republican Party is not supposed to stand for, program. The notion here is threefold. American companies should be forced to hire American labor. Government contracts should go to American companies. American producers should be protected from domestic competition by revoking or altering international trade agreements. 1930s economics, in other words. All three of these policies have a long, ingloriously stupid history. It's like I say, what I was alluding to earlier. Trump is a 90s Democrat, 80s, 90s, basically the Democrats before they went totally nutso crazy with this gay rights, transgender, all that crap. When they were still primarily, the last echoes of the New Deal, those Democrats, when they were focused in on economics rather than social justice insanity. First, the notion that American companies should be forced to hire American labor is a conceit of the left. It is based on the same failures of economic understanding that lead to advocating higher minimum wages. The notion that cramming through an increase in labor costs does not cost jobs to a company, does not cost or raise costs to the consumer, and does not degrade the quality of future products. It does all three in spades. Yet, Trump and other protectionists, such as Attorney General Jeff Sessions and Ann Coulter, have long seen H-1B visas, supposedly high-tech visas allowing workers to enter the United States to fill jobs for domestically based companies, as a great bugaboo. There are certainly significant problems with the current administration of H-1B visas. Michelle Malkin has rightly pointed out that there are those who falsely sponsor immigrants to the United States without any intention of employing them. And she's also right to criticize the H-1B lie that workers from abroad never replace American workers, and the inflated claim that there is a serious shortage of Americans qualified to fill jobs in science, technology, engineering, and math, STEM jobs. Other valid critiques of H-1B visas are that they tie visa holders to jobs and give employers total leverage over them. So it's not like the H-1B visa program doesn't need some cleaning up, shall we say. But there is a broader ideological critique that is simply false. The notion that America benefits as a country by heavily restricting its labor base rather than by expanding the pool of qualified applicants. In other words, a meritocracy. There is a strong case to be made that in a welfare state, we should curb any program that increases the domestic unemployment rate because the taxpayers absorb the burden of the increased number of the unemployed. But there is no evidence that high-tech visas increase the unemployment rate, since high-tech companies will simply shift production overseas to take advantage of lower wages there and similar job qualifications. This deprives American companies and Americans of jobs. Just let the free market work, MAGA maniacs. See, the goal of an economy is to create better products and services at a lower price, thereby creating new cycles of supply and demand. The goal of an economy is not to freeze the available pool of labor, thereby confiscating wealth from employers on behalf of employees lucky enough to be born inside the United States. It's difficult to understand why people who think that we should have a closed immigration system in order to preserve jobs don't also think that we should have dramatically higher minimum wages or forced price controls. It's all part of the same genre, Trumpers. Second, Trump's program of ensuring that government contracts go to American companies makes little sense, given that this is merely a government subsidy of popular political interests. How is this any different from Obama's green energy boondoggle corruption? Why should taxpayers foot the bill for cement made in Pennsylvania rather than China, absent some political payoff from politicians? And with yours and my money. And in fact, Trump's new program allows widespread waivers, just like Obamacare did, for government contracts if the government decides that product or pricing is insufficient from American suppliers. As we just heard from Kevin Williamson, in practice, that means if you have the right friends and make the right donations, the Buy American rules may be used to steer contracts your way. If you don't, they won't. That is the epitome of Trump, isn't it? Crony capitalism. I remember back during the campaign, Alex Ferguson on Constitution Radio used to say, well, at least Trump is a capitalist. Yeah, a crony capitalist, which means no capitalist at all. This idea that being pro-business is the same thing as being a capitalist. No, it's not. Big business is not necessarily capitalist. Good Lord, just go back and review the whole Obamacare process. When that monstrosity was being put together, big business they're the biggest fans of big government you're ever going to find. Because they're mercenary. They don't care where their money's coming from. They're not capitalists. They're just for whatever puts, whatever lines the bottom line. They don't care about anything else. They don't care if it comes from the free market. They don't care. They're perfectly fine, perfectly happy to use government to squash smaller competition. That's Trump in it to a T. That's Trump to the heavens. You want to know what Donald Trump is? That's Donald Trump. He's a crony capitalist, folks. Finally, Trump's program of producing everything in America is economically illiterate. Earlier this year, alleged White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus stated, quote, "We can make everything here, and our goal should be to try to make everything we can in the United States so that the money gets put in the pockets of Americans." You mean if it's made somewhere else, the money doesn't find its way into the pockets of Americans? If Toyota builds another car manufacturing plant in America, that money doesn't go into the hands of Americans? Really? Economically illiterate indeed, ladies and gentlemen. See, what Priebus said, we can make everything here, our goal should be to try to make everything we can in the United States so that the money gets put in the pockets of Americans, is not only untrue, it is simply nutty, insane, counterfactual. Subsidizing domestic industry and cutting off imports in order to help the economy is a fool's errand that produces the exact opposite result. Why? Because it's big government statism. It's socialism with a nationalist veneer plastered over it. See, back in the 1930s, that's the reason why I call this 1930s economics, Nazi Germany embarked on a course of autarky, assuming that they could strengthen the domestic economy through a combination of subsidies and tariffs. The result, which Hitler actually wanted, was a requirement for territorial expansion. Remember, this was in the service of rebuilding the Wehrmacht and the Luftwaffe, the Nazi war machine. Since trade enriches countries with resources beyond their own borders. Free trade not only enriches countries, but makes war less likely. That's the lesson of the 1930s. Trade barriers spark and breed poverty and war. Free trade, globalism, as the MAGA maniacs call it, spreads prosperity and peace. In the age of the global economy, since the end of the Second World War, has there been a general war? No, there hasn't. And in an age of weapons of mass destruction, most essential, most precisely, most especially nuclear weapons, that's a good thing, isn't it? That's what I would think. That's what history teaches. North Korea is autarkic today. So is Venezuela. Both are impoverished. You see, trade enriches both sides. Banning trade taxes certain domestic parties on behalf of others. In other words, if Canada raises tariffs against American timber, you know who's getting punished? Canadian consumers. Not Americans, Canadian consumers. And if Trump wants to impose steel tariffs, guess who's going to take it in the shorts for that? American consumers, American construction businesses, like the businesses that are constructing the pipelines that he just signed off on in the last 100 days. Protectionism punishes the very people that are supposedly being protected. They're not being protected. They're being abused and victimized and impoverished. Protectionism is just socialism with a nationalist veneer. It's big government. It's socialism. But this is the truly tyrannical side of economic nationalism, aka National Socialism. The idea that your freedom as an individual to engage in commerce must be made subservient to a sort of collectivist loyalty test. You know, I've debated this with MAGA maniacs, and there are some who rather than engaging in the substance of my argument, they come back with, well, why do you hate America so much? There's your collectivist loyalty test, ladies and gentlemen. In its own way, it is no different than Joe Biden's statement some years ago, as aforementioned, that paying higher taxes made you more patriotic. But patriotism isn't about restricting your freedom and prosperity to help someone in a dying industry. It's about upholding a system of freedom for everyone, even those who benefit more from those freedoms. Economic nationalism, aka National Socialism, is FDR's economic interventionism and Herbert Hoover's anti-trade policy repackaged. Donald Richburg, the second head of FDR's National Recovery Administration, which was unconstitutional, by the way, stated that America had to reject quote, gold-plated anarchy that masqueraded as rugged individualism. Close quote. Instead, America should embrace the great, quote, resuming the quote, the great essential industries operated under public obligation appropriate to the public interest in them, close quote. In this logic, economic freedom should be made subservient to the supposed national interest. The result? The greatest depression in American history, relieved only by the full-scale militarization of American society in World War II, which the MAGA-maniacs also professed to despise. They call it globalism. See, it is not America First policy to put American individualism last and government theft first. That policy kills jobs and destroys liberty. Trump should know that as a businessman. Well, he would if he were a capitalist, which he's not.